What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to CanesCast. I'm one half of your host here, Phil, here with Garrett. We're ready to kick off a brand new season of CanesCast, season 3, and more importantly, brand new season of Canes football. And we're excited. Got a lot to unpack. Gonna have a good show for you today. A lot to unpack about the offseason. And then next week, we're going to talk about the preview we've been waiting for when we take on the Lizards up in Gainesville. So, Garrett, first of all, what are some early thoughts? I know you're happy to be back and get rolling.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, starting off the season with a rivalry game, an SEC team. That's really a hard way to start the season. They have these showcase games where there's, marquee matchups a lot of times. You'd like to see a team with a lot of new pieces maybe start to gel a little bit. So nothing like just diving right in and getting right after it. So the offseason just all been about the Florida game, being ready for that game. So here we are 2 weeks from now, and we'll find out, are we really headed in the right direction, or are we still got a long ways to go?
Oh, absolutely. You're right. I mean, you talk about we're out of the frying pan into the fire. Maybe we're into the fire and then out of the into the frying pan from the fire. I don't know how you'd want to say that, but yeah, we definitely don't start with cupcakes. Regardless of how people feel about Florida and what they did last year, as we know, they weren't very good at all, weren't bowl eligible, which I find hysterical when I add into the fact that a lot of Gator fans are talking like we're going to go in there and not get killed. And I know that a lot of people are that we're going to get killed when we go in there. And then a lot of people are talking about Canes fans are super hyped. And then we hear, oh, offseason champs again, the whole thing. But they're a rival, and they're not something that you can take for granted because, we don't play Florida all the time, and that's on them in my beliefs. And I know it's your beliefs too, but that's a whole other discussion. It would be nice to play Florida A&M and Ball State first and kind of gel a little bit, but I like the whole, test the metal straight out of the gate.
It's a big season for both Mario Cristobal and Billy Napier,
yep.
Florida's coach. So really what's most exciting is this is like, not say playoff level type of an atmosphere, which we'll talk about that since this is the first year of the 12-team playoff.
Yep.
But this is huge. I mean, one of these two coaches is really going to start off the year in a really important years for both of them on the hot seat, because the winner will probably, be a hero. The guy who loses this game, whichever coach is not going to be on the winning team is really going to start the year off, under pressure. Florida more so because they have such a tough schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Texas and all the new SEC teams. Then their rivalry games, which are always, hotly contested. And, it's a tough season for that group. So, I expect Florida to be ready. This is like all the makings of them throwing all of their ammunition at you. They're not going to leave a whole lot of stone unturned. I think they're going to be motivated for the game, especially being at home to kick off the season. And what better way to start, what could be a tough year for them. What better way to start off than, taking Miami down, a team with a lot more expectations just because of the offseason additions. The schedule kind of sets up nice. And, Mario Cristobal and company have been doing a good job of recruiting. So there's talent, as we've discussed. That's never been the problem for Miami, is having the talent in the stable, but it's really getting that talent to do what's expected and maybe even more than expected. That's where we've fallen short.
I think for me, I want to touch on one thing, but I'm not going to get into it too much because we're going to talk about the Gators next week. I want to talk about the season as a whole, expectations, and the off season, for this show. I will touch on the Gator. It's a hotly contested thing. I mean, we're a week away. I will say that regardless of feelings, trying to set feelings aside, obviously it's impossible. We're fans and we want the Canes and everything else. I feel like even with that and how people feel about last season, how we shouldn't have, we underachieved and everything. I think there's still more pressure on Napier because of the schedule, like you mentioned. I think it's a bigger game for them than it is us. Just because the schedule, there's no let up really. I think there is. They immediately play Sanford or something pretty quick after. There's a team that, they should beat. And to be fair to the schedule, we never know how the schedule is going to go. We have a very manageable schedule on the surface, but you never know how things are going to turn out. I get into that with the NFL all the time. It's, oh, this schedule, strength of schedule. Every year you look at a team who you think is going to be a killer and they're not good. And the team that you think is going to be bad and they're very good. You never know. You're going to get, it's a little less, it fluctuates a little less in college. Obviously, you kind of have a better idea, I would say, than the NFL on teams that surprise you immensely. But yeah, I'd say more pressure on Napier. As far as we go, we're getting praise from national outlets that I guess, see, people love to clown the Canes as far as, oh, off-season champs, and then you fall flat. And that's what you're saying. It's a big off-season to a big season for Cristobal to prove that, hey, this talent can be taken to the next level. We have a schedule that's very manageable. I think it was Paul Feinbaum, maybe. He has big expectations. He recently just said we were underrated, underappreciated at number 19. But I think it might have been him that said that we're going to lose our first game and run the rest of the table. Or maybe it was Joel Klatt, Josh Pat. All these guys are singing our praises and saying really good things, which I know scares the you-know-what out of you. I would rather fly under the radar, I think. As a general rule for the viewers, I'm generally the more optimistic one. Garrett's generally the more pessimistic one. And that kind of blew up tremendously in his face a couple years ago when he tried to pivot. And we saw the season we saw in Cristobal's first year. So that has put Garrett in a position where, despite the talent, where I think I'm coming into it a little more bullish, he's going to be a little more trepid. If that's the word I want, a little, or tepid. I don't know what the word I want, but a little more cautious, we'll say, going into the predictions for this season. But I'm on board as far as the talent goes. Third year, Cristobal's. You remember when he came in, in winter. This is really his second. He's 2 full recruiting classes. So now we're really seeing Cristobal's guys, and this is it. This is the time when you have a Cam Ward, a Martinez, a Powell, you bring in experienced guys on defense, on offense. This is the time you got to make the jump. You got to take the leap. And I think that this team, the floor for this team should be a 10-win team. That's the floor. This team should be in playoff contention all year long. And whether that doesn't start out right away, if we start out with an L and win a bunch of games, it'll come back. But that needs to be that's the expectation, because in our core, Miami fans always expect that. I know we've been tortured for a lot of years. In our core, that's what we expect.
That's gonna be tough. Like, making a statement like 10 wins is a floor for a team that hasn't won more than 10 games in the last 20 years. Once is
true. But look at the schedule. Look at the talent.
That's what's so frustrating as a fan is,
yep,
that's the expectations, even though we haven't really had that scene for this team for quite a lot of years in a row. So
2017.
That's what's, the fun part about college football. Every year, there's 30, 40, 50 teams that feel good about how things went, how they're progressing. Then when the bullets start flying, the games start actually matter. You start to count, because in college football there's no preseason. You just jump right into it. This is a big season, one with all the moving parts. So the landscape of college football is going to change quite a bit. You have the Pac-12, which last year was actually a pretty good conference. There's basically split between the Big Ten and the Big 12 for the most part.
It's the Pac-2 now.
But I mean, the two that are left over aren't even a conference. But I'm saying, like, USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon moving to the Big Ten. Yep. I know people aren't, as maybe on this watching this show aren't as in tune, but like Utah has been playing extremely good football the last several years. They're gonna beat up a couple more of the Big 12 teams. So Texas, going to the SEC, Oklahoma going to the SEC are gonna beat LSU's and Alabama's once every now and again, more so than they were used to. So you're gonna have a season where I think it's gonna be hard to see a across the board in the Power Four conferences an undefeated team because of the shifts. I think that's going to be very hard to see now from now on forward. So now what does that mean? Are you going to be ranked 10 if you have two losses, 3 losses? Are you still going to be able in the conversation for the playoff? There is a championship game, so you can recover. If Miami can, for all this time we've been in the ACC, we've been in one championship game. and it didn't
Should have
even
been
go
two.
well at that time.
Should have been two.
So this is important for Miami and Mario Cristobal to show the rest of us that they are, in fact, on an upward trajectory. This is a year to show it. There's no excuses anymore. I know Phil alluded to it earlier when we first started the show. I was extremely bullish on a guy with some recent success taking over a program that was just lack of good leadership, rather than it was the problem of being recruiting and talent on the team. That I thought that the talent was in the stable enough that we could have won, given the schedule. It lined up like really a lot like this year, where there's winnable games in most weeks. There isn't a game where you're just flat out feel bad about the competition level, except for when the season starts. Obviously, will change throughout the season, but going on paper, it looks like it lines up really well for this team. I have a hard time saying I want to say what I really think, because of, again, being burned on it before. I think 10 wins is reasonable. If there's 2 losses, you hope that they're against people that you should either be in the game or it should be a good game against, like a Florida State, a Clemson, a Florida to begin the season. What's been the bugaboo for Miami is that there's 2 or 3 games every year that they stumble and trip up against a team that has a whole lot less expectations and talent, and they either get out coached or whatever it may have you. But we don't show up for all 12 regular season games. That's been Miami's MO. Is this finally the year that we are going to get over that?
I'll tell you, the thing that scares me the most about the schedule is I feel confident that there's a path to start the way we started last year. Now, we would have continued to be undefeated if we didn't have the blunder, right, against Georgia Tech that will haunt Canes fans forever, because we didn't lose that game. We gave that game away. We really did not. You kneel the game, you kneel the ball, it's over. But to be fair, Chaney didn't fumble the ball either. But when I look at it, it doesn't matter. Can't give that game up. That will forever be a black mark, no matter how, because I look at last year and I think no matter what our record is, could have been with any other game, you add a win to that because that was a guaranteed victory. And that's a black mark that, it'll just always be there. It could have been a different bowl game. Could have been a different result if more guys, opted to play. Lots of things. If we beat Florida, we got Florida A&M, we got Ball State. Okay, there's 3 wins there. We should win those. Those are such a drastic level of talent difference that I'm not necessarily concerned with those. What does scare me is the USF game. That worries me because that feels like after USF, you go Virginia Tech, you start ACC play, you're at home for that, you're on the road after being at home at Ball State. Against Ball State, you go South Florida, then you got Virginia Tech. South Florida almost beat Alabama. And I know you will talk about the benching of Milroe and all the different stuff that went into that game, but the talent discrepancy between Alabama and just about everybody is a thing in college football for a lot of years. And for South Florida to push them, that's going to give that team a heck of a lot of confidence against anybody, just for the rest of last season and into this season. And, that's something that if they can recapture that, that'll be there. So to me, that's a trap. Virginia Tech, I'm happy we're playing them again. That's a rival that we should play. I'm excited for that game. Again, we should win. Cal worries me in the sense that when's the last time we've traveled that far? Washington in 2000, and we lost that game to start the season, and we lost that game, and it cost us what should have been 3 championships in a row if we didn't get hosed. If we win that, the BCS, if we get in the championship like we should, we win. Greatest team of all time the next year. And then obviously we know the robbery. And I challenge anybody to combat that against Ohio State, which should have been ultimately 3 championships. Regardless, that travel, how does the team respond? Then we go to Louisville. Louisville is a team that is, they have an argument to be ranked. I've seen a lot of people upset about that. I agree that they have a lot of talent on that team. I think that team is an argument to be in the top 25 to start the season.
And just to show that when I said 2 years ago that Mario Cristobal showing up and we should be a contender is not ridiculous. Louisville was in the AACC championship game in their head coach's first year. And it wasn't like that was a team that the year before was so great that, the coach got a better job. It was a not great year being replaced. So again, you've seen that our opponents can do this. Why are we not capable of doing these kinds of transitions? Again, what makes me upset is like when I watch people like us doing this kind of content is they make excuses like it's the talent. The talent had to get better at Miami before we could win this and that. Yet year after year after year, teams that are less talented than us have just fine football seasons. Their coaching isn't, for lack of a better term, such crap that they can sustain, or you know what I mean? This is what's been frustrating is watching these last couple years, and then literally the 18, 19 years before that. Is every year it's some level of expectation because things are done in the off season or there's moves being made, what have you. And then every year we seem to watch the same program. It's like it doesn't even make sense. It's almost like being in the Twilight Zone. It's because every year it's like rinse and repeat the same exact story. I don't know how it keeps getting written the same exact way, but it's, without fail, it's been happening for 20 years now plus.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, and I agree. I think one of our games, as frustrated as we were last year with the offense, one of the games that we felt, it was back and forth, up and down. You see a Texas A&M game, you see a Boston College game, and then you see how we played against Georgia Tech, and the offense was so feast or famine and weird last year. Louisville was a game that we played really well, and we should have won that game. But yeah, they did do it. I think the expectations.
And then you have games like NC State that are just so abysmal. You're like, what are we watching? Who is this team?
You're right.
How is this team the same team that we saw the week before, or it was 3 weeks prior to that when we were playing really well? And then Georgia Tech just opened up a can of worms of exposed our weaknesses, and most of it was at the quarterback position. That being said, this year's team, that's what's interesting to me, and what Mario Cristobal has done is they continued to recruit the freshman level really well. But now with the transfer portal, they went, and like every skill position got a guy that either is going to compete with the top position, defensive tackle, receiver, safety, quarterback. You've got an influx of good, experienced talent. Now that this is why it should be a no-brainer. Why a guy that's the Pac-12 rusher of the year should then all of a sudden it should particularly to success here at Miami. That's what's going to be unique, is that we'll watch how does this unfold, of course, but that's one of the biggest storylines is it the talent that got brought from all these other bits and pieces from around the country? Is that going to bode well for this particular team this year? It worked out well in, the team up north's case a couple years ago. Are we going to finally mirror some of that? Is that going to play out here for us? I really like Cam Ward's abilities. And people that have watched this show, if you're watching again, you've heard me for 3 years now complain or moan or whatever you want about the guy that can play this kind of football. So that's what I'm excited to see, is because he should have a decent line in front of him to not have to make as much, magician type moves in the backfield to elude pressures, that kind of thing. He should have a relatively clean pocket a lot of times. Will the scheme, force the, defenses to break because they push the envelope and make him, take a little RPO, but keep the ball a little more than we've been inclined to do in the past? I don't really see that we have a backup. The one thing that really scares me about this whole season is that we have all this talk about every guy is lined up, ready just to, knock them down. We should all have all Americans all over the board. Is where are we going to face adversity? What game is it going to be where one of those guys goes down, and then is this a team that's capable of withstanding that adversity and actually continuing to improve or continue fight the season? The biggest position in the question mark would be the quarterback position, because we don't have a guy behind him that plays like that. Mm-hmm. That the whole scheme, this whole system that you would imagine they're all building around this type of a talent. If we have to go to the guy behind him, they're going to have to play a completely different ball game at that stage, I would imagine. Because Emory Williams, as good as he had flashes last year, he's just not that kind of a quarterback. There's plenty of talent. He could play his game and be successful. I don't think that's an impossibility. But that's what's really going to be the thing I'm most curious to watch throughout the season is they're going to be like, let's say Cam Ward. Is there a guy like Cam Ward that goes down, or Damian Martinez? Mark Flesher. Mark Flesher doesn't seem like he's back ready to go. I don't think we would have a
Yeah.
worry about that if he did, except we're in the first couple games. I don't know if Martinez goes down with something. Is there a good running back that can take the load right away in the second or third game until Fletcher is back and healthy? The receiver, the thing I really loved is if you watched enough Washington State games last year, we have receivers almost identical to guys that he was having a lot of. Cam Ward was having a lot of success with it last year at Washington State. I think George is just exactly like that. That guy he had, Williams was I think the guy. Strepo's exactly like their little slot receiver guy, the guy that he kept going to. So what I do like in our possibility of this next coming season to be successful is that we have a lot of what Cam should be comfortable with, as in also Isaiah Horton that's finally hopefully coming into his own. He'll take big strides, and I don't think they have that kind of a big X physical body out there that's got speed and some hopefully playmaking ability. But then you also went and grabbed Sam Brown from Houston. That his MO is kind of yards after catch. I've seen that he led the nation in yards after catch average and all that good stuff. So
He's a big body though too. He's
can he take
6'2".
those
He's a big guy.
screens, break a tackle, and then take it the distance? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
The biggest question mark I think on the team, and I think this is universal, is the secondary. I know we have 2 safety starters, which tongue in cheek, one of those guys was actually a linebacker. I'm on orange and green parazing as a safety, wherein if you watched again our content before, I screamed that we seem to want to play guys out of position at our level that then when they go off and play in the NFL, they move those positions and they have great careers. I don't understand why we hold people up and almost are detrimental to their development. So are we going to play better in the secondary without Cam Kinchins? I think he was a great addition, but with more of a real true safety, the 2 of them back there, are they going to play better as a unit? Mm-hmm. Our cornerbacks, can Damari Brown step up and really be that lockdown cornerback that we've looked for a long time from South Florida? Can Daryl Porter have well, in counts, he had a great season. Can Jadaeus Richard really take that next step and be the opposite end? Can they bookend it? It sounds to me like Damari Brown's going to slide into nickel a little bit. And then so you got Porter and Jadaeus Richard out there. Can Robert Stafford step up in his second year, redshirt freshman? There's some freshmen, OJ Frederic that has made a lot of waves up to this point in camp. Is he going to be able to play? So secondary is the biggest question. I think I like the athletes there. It sounds like, Saquon Patterson was a huge commit, a great recruit. Can he step in and have a big Ruben Bain type effect? I don't want to sit here and say everyone can be Ruben Bain, but the defensive tackle, Justin Scott, can he step in and be a big body that we've really needed and get bigger as he grows in the next couple of years? Can he really be that dominant inside force? So there's a lot to like. There's a lot to like for Miami. What sucks is putting this content together. Is like I want to just sit here and say, oh, I'm so happy. Can't wait to watch it all and be excited. But I know down good and well in my soul, I need to be careful to be, not be let down again should we stumble and fall, which has been the MO for us lately.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is like I was saying before with the schedule is like after that Louisville game, we go Florida State, Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. So for me, my biggest fear is looking at the schedule, getting through it, having a 2017 type season, no slip ups. We look great. And then that Syracuse game is that Pitt game after Thanksgiving kind of thing. And that same kind of, same ilk.
Well, and Virginia Tech scares me because their quarterback is an extremely good athlete. Kyron Drones is
okay. So, well, here's a question.
He's what we've struggled with defensively is as good as we played defensive here and there in the last 5 years. We've always struggled to stop a guy that's a running quarterback. Mm-hmm. Is more to this strength, the running ability. Is those kinds of guys have kicked our tail in, and we did okay. Well, last year wasn't as bad. BC, the Castellanos kid, I was scared of watching him dang near beat Florida State early in the season. By the end of the year, we did real well against him. So if we can play like that, we're in good shape. But Virginia Tech being one of those games that, if we are 4-0, are we going to come into the 5th game of the season and let that blow up in our face. That's what I wonder is this the type of team that can play with people patting him on the back? That has not happened. I have not seen that happen lately for a very long time.
That's since
So
2017.
it's hard to say that I see that we're that good with that way. No, even the 2017 teams were most oftentimes the underdog, and there wasn't a lot of expectations going into that season. A great deal of expectations. So they started winning, and I'm saying by the end of the year there was momentum, but that team played from almost an underdog role almost all season long.
They did. I
And that
just
was the
think
only
after that
only
Virginia Tech game,
team we've had
we
to
turned into
reach double digits
the Notre
in the
Dame
last
game. After the
20
Virginia
years.
Tech game, we took the Notre Dame game and we took it to another level, and it was, that changed everything. So that was a huge momentum thing, in that moment. That was just a huge momentum swing, and that
But
was
also
where we
made it
felt the closest to what we
but
had,
also made that last game
what we
against
want.
Pitt so devastating. Is we had all that momentum going. One more win, and we could have completed an undefeated regular season first time in 22 years. At that stage, or 16 years at that stage, right? And then no, but I don't think the expectation was to go in to beat Clemson that year, because I think Clemson was the national championship, or they went to the national championship that year. They were very good, but we didn't even show up for that game. We barely put 3 points on the board. The biggest, letdown at the end of the season there was that loss against Wisconsin, because we should have won that game.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's been the MO of this team, is when there's expectation. Now we finally have hit that level to people around the world give a crap outside of Canes fans. That's when we seem to not show up in the last several years. There's been a breath of positivity going.
To wrap it up, then we've dissected a bunch of stuff here, obviously, as far as offseason, really just expectations on, what we are used to seeing in the tortured society of this is, watching us have expectations and then fall short. There's trap games here and there's things. I want to ask you, and we'll try to make this as
Duke with Manny coming back home, that's huge.
So
this year.
what are the 3 games on the schedule, 2 or 3 games on the schedule that worry you the most? And then I'll give you mine, and then your incoming guy that you're most excited about.
I'm going with the 3 games that concern me the most are Florida, Louisville, and Duke. I know we'll play to the level that Florida State would play us, so that's not the big one for me. Florida, the biggest game, it's you got to start off the year on the right foot.
Yep.
I don't care if it's low scoring. You got to win by 1. That's all it takes. The Virginia Tech game, because again, I think their quarterback comes in real tough to beat that kind of a player. I think that's really going to give us fits. Louisville, because I think going to Cal, we have a week off after that, so we should have time to get reset. But Miami's played so crappy after bye weeks lately that's where I expect us to struggle a little bit too. So those 3 games are the ones that are extremely concerning to me. The player I'm most excited to see, I'm not going to go with Cam Ward. That one's too easy. I'm going to go with JoJo Trader. This is one of the higher end recruits that I think I've seen things, personally from content out there, that I really love the way that skill set has a lot of room to grow. And, he's got to get a little bit stronger, I know. But as far as the guys coming in this year, that's one guy I'm super excited to watch on the field this year at some point.
All right.
How about you?
Yeah, for me, I'm, games. We obviously always circle the Florida State game. I agree that as a general rule, we'll show up for that game. And I do believe that as effort and everything.
Oh, I didn't say Duke. Sorry. I'll finish Duke real quick.
Okay.
Duke, because again, I think Manny Diaz coming in, this is the game type of environment again that we've had a Butch Davis bringing an NFIU team into Miami and beating us. These are the types of moments that we've have crapped the bed on several times. That game scares me too. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
You're good. Like I was saying, the Florida and the Florida State games, you're right. Starting out with a bang is great because it could set the stuff up to hopefully go on a run. That game is I believe that the rivalry games like that will generally always show up for the most part. So I don't think we're going to go into those and get blown out one way or another, or necessarily. Obviously, we want to see us doing the blowing out of the teams, and we have seen us do that in our lives to both these teams. But they should be games, right? I would love to see us start out with a bang and just crush Florida at Florida. But for me, games that I worry about, that I say trap games, that interest me the most. I'm going to try to go off the radar, a little bit. I think the South Florida game, everybody should be looking at because it's before ACC play. It's before Virginia Tech. It could be 3-game win streak going to that, looking ahead. That game worries me just a little bit. It's a game we should crush. I hope we do. I mentioned the Cal game earlier, and a game that we should talent-wise dominate them. There's no comparison, but it's across the country. I want to see how this team handles that. And honestly, the Duke game, every Miami fan points to that. I've heard this on other podcasts. Every Miami fan points to that because losing to Diaz would be just terrible, right? We don't want to do that. We'll have other cracks because he's not getting canned after 1 year unless they win no games. And that was the one win, right? But that there's such a talent discrepancy there to me against Duke. I want to point to, honestly, Georgia Tech a little bit, not just because of last year, and I've heard people mention this as well, but because they do have a good offense. And how does our offense line up and take advantage of that defense late in the year? Not a letdown going there if we're continuing to roll. And then finally, it's a dome. But I want to just give an honorable mention to that Syracuse game because we watched how the 2017 season unfolded or finished. And we saw this team roll through and then just have a game. Now, granted, that was outdoors. This won't be Syracuse, nowhere near the talent. I'm just saying the focus of not looking ahead to the ACC championship. Is that game already locked up at that point? If this team has placed to the level that they're capable of, are we already locked into an ACC championship game? Do we care at that point? Not to take a game that could hurt you if we're undefeated and we get to the ACC championship game. Losing that game might not keep us out, right? And honestly, we might see a 3-loss team get in. Conference champs aside, we might see a 3-loss team get in this 12-team play format. We don't know how this is going to look yet. But not losing a game that you should win that could hurt you so badly that if you don't win your ACC championship game, you're not in. So those are some games that I just point out that jump off the page. There's nothing's an exact science. There'll be a game like Wake Forest might be the game. Who knows? As for me, incoming guy, I'm excited for a couple of reasons. I was excited as a recruit that when we landed him as a recruit, and obviously, NCAA's influenced me a little bit too. Playing football as Lightfoot. I'm excited for his potential at defensive end. I think that could be a guy who we see have a strong season. Maybe not quite Bane, but have a strong season and get playing time and get more and more playing time as the season goes on. And then be a guy who's part of a dynamic duo there with Bane on the other side, because we know Bane's here for at least another year. And I love that. And I think part of the expectation for this season, the reason it's so high is because how well of a job Cristobal has done in the trenches. And all of the skill players we've had in Miami for years, part of our thing that we've lacked is particularly the offensive side in the trenches to dominate games. And I think we're at a point where we can finally move the line of scrimmage consistently. I'm excited for that. But, I'm going to wrap it up with that. I'm going to leave us on a high note. Let's move the trenches. Let's win games. Say whatever you want, Garrett. I'm going to end my speech on a high note because we're closing out here. But that's where I'm at. Those are my thoughts.
It's real good if you guys are watching this video this week. We appreciate being able to do this for now a third season. So hopefully you stick with us. Tell your friends, spread the word. It's always all about the U, y'all.